Hello and welcome to another installment of Sustainability in Your Ear. It's the Earth911 podcast, and I'm Mitch Ratcliffe, your host. We're talking today with another sustainability innovator, but we're taking a different tack today. We often talk to people who have started companies. In this case, we've got an author who is the president of a company, Marc Choyt, with reflectivejewelry.com in Santa Fe, New Mexico. He's president of Reflective Jewelry, but he also is the author of the recently released Ethical Jewelry Expose, which you can find at the reflectivejewelry.com website. Marc, welcome to the show. There's a fascinating read. You put together an entire book online about what's going on in so-called ethical jewelry businesses that really broke through a lot of assumptions that I had. Why'd you do it? What started this project?
Well, first, Mitch, let me just thank you for having the opportunity to be on your show. It's a great honor and pleasure to be here.
Well, thank you.
I'm the only certified fair trade gold jeweler in the United States, and I'm flow certified. So what that means is that yin and yang symbol that you might see on chocolate or coffee, I actually have that. I can post that on my wall. And yet in the UK, there's over 250 of these flow certified fair trade gold jewelers. And so I've been working with fair trade, and I've been working to try to create an ethical jewelry movement that is based solely on helping small-scale producer communities. And yet, in this country, it's a very, very nominal or weak movement, while in the UK, it's a great movement. And so I needed to anchor all the different issues and write a piece in order to explain what is really going on in this country, because ethical jewelry, responsible jewelry, right now it is the big phase. Every jeweler, you're going to say, oh, I'm conflict-free, I'm ethical. But in fact, that is just a layer, in most cases, of spin. And that's what I addressed in this expose. It goes into great detail about how the forward-facing market narratives have been created to deceive consumers who want real change in this country and want to use their money to benefit a jewelry that actually is ethical and actually does benefit producer communities.
So let's talk about what happens on the ground in a fair trade mining environment. Who are these miners?
That's a great question. There are 125 million, roughly, small-scale miners around the world at this time. And of those 125 million, about 20 million of those miners are mining for gold, and they produce about 20% of the annual gold supply chain. However, they are 90% of the labor that produces gold in gold mining. So the idea is this: these communities are characterized by extreme exploitation, bad labor practices, child labor. They don't get paid generally more than 70 or 80%, sometimes as low as 60% for the gold they produce. What happens is they're stuck in a cycle of exploitation and poverty. These are the people that we need to work with, because this is the politics of bread. It isn't about greed. It isn't about like large-scale mining, which I do not support, large-scale gold mining. These are the people who we can work with, and it's an amazing development opportunity if we can use our economy, and you can have a wedding ring that can support these people. Now, fair trade gold is a very radical product because it's the only fair trade product that isn't agricultural. And what they did is they went in and certified these gold mines, so they have excellent labor standards, they have excellent, they're paid a fair price and a premium of $2,000 per kilo in addition to their fair price, and they're able to actually use the resources of the land. So the people of the land control the resources of the land. And that's what makes it such a powerful story, is that like the gold that I have in my company, the exact mine that it comes from.
And that's really interesting. The idea that you would know that you would have the information about who took this out of the ground, and because all of that was wiped away by industrial mining. Companies took stuff out of the ground.
Exactly.
Now let's talk a little bit about the state of the mainstream jewelry industry and its relationship to ethical jewelry right now. There's an organization called the Responsible Jewelry Council. Tell us about that.
They are comprised of over 1,100 members, and their standards have widely been denounced by Human Rights Watch, which recently released a campaign this past February, Earthworks Action. And what they do is they are a nonprofit organization that certifies companies as responsible. And they are the basis of ethical sourcing in this country. In fact, companies like Brilliant Earth support and adhere by the Responsible Jewelry Council, Ethical Metalsmiths, all these so-called groups that are adhering to ethics are all working with this major Responsible Jewelry Council. Now, here's the problem. Here's the problem, Mitch. Let me ask you this. How can you kill 3.7 million people, which happened in the 70s, and it happened in the 80s and 90s, and wars funded by diamonds? How can you have millions of people impacted by large-scale mining, and then by these very mining companies, these alleged atrocities, which you can go on and research a London Mining Network,
right,
and see these companies that are members of the Responsible Jewelry Council, that are members, and De Beers, they're members of this Responsible Jewelry Council. How is it that you can have these claims of responsibility without truth and reconciliation, without restitution, and to these impacted communities? Now, what happened was, that's exactly what they're doing. And in my view, anyone who supports that frame, the only way you can do that is by saying that these lives, all these people that were killed, they don't matter. See, so that's the core problem. That's the core problem with the ethics of the large-scale mining. No truth and reconciliation, and no real efforts to restitution except these small projects which they magnify into these great narratives to make you think they're doing something major, when in fact, all they're doing is flinging coins to a beggar instead of addressing the edifices which produce the beggar. And that's roughly a paraphrase of one of the things that Dr. Martin Luther King said. So what I'm suggesting is that we cannot be working within the structures of the mainstream jewelry. Because they really literally have the historical blood on their hands. They do, and until you address the alleged atrocities, you cannot claim ethics. I mean, I was walking around trade shows right after when the Blood Diamond film came out, and I was wondering how is it that none of these people were accountable? How is it they got away with it? These people who are diamanteers basically invented this term conflict-free. The conflict-free term, conflict-free diamonds, has been widely denounced by everyone in civil society except people who have a major interest in the diamond business. Even the organizations that were part of that original conflict-free narrative, the Kimberley certification process, such as Global Witness and Impact, which is Partnership Africa-Canada, they all say this process doesn't work. And yet, this narrative, conflict-free narrative, is just as powerful. It's an underpinning of the so-called responsible jewelry narrative. And what we have is all these edifices, this sort of market, forward-facing consumer to market narrative that makes it appear like they're doing something different when in fact all they're doing is supporting the same practices that they have done in the past without ever dealing with the past atrocities. And so that to me is unacceptable, and that's why I've been the only fair trade gold jeweler for over 3 years. That's probably why no one has been able to join me, because I don't even know why. I mean, because I won't even get into that right now. Well, and you know, the thing is, you're bringing up a really important point, and one that comes across so clearly in your expose, because you recount on a number of occasions conversations or actually having been present when people behaved absolutely abysmally toward other people, toward the environment, no regard for the dignity of the people who were doing the work that produced the wealth that they were extracting. That's right. And that's in the actual conclusion of the expose. The expose is written in a series of Russian nesting dolls, and each one is a separate layer of deception that you have to understand that builds in each other until you get to the center. And what we find in the center of the expose, and my argument is the same kind of practices all the way back, might as well go back to Vasco da Gama and the early modernism and his trips down the coast of Africa for slaves and gold. What we have right now instead are corporations putting out these forward-facing narratives that hide those same intentions, which are disregard to indigenous people and also disregard for the environment, and also a lack of commitment to fully supporting small-scale producers, which should be the center. The exclusive and domain of any ethical jewelry has to be the small-scale producer. Those are the people we need to help.
Well, and those people are also the people that can make a difference in the sustainability of their mines. Big companies have plenty of insulation from the responsibility, but a miner who has been shown how to be sustainable locally might, fill their mine back up, might plant over the hole they dug in the first place, and that's a kind of respect for the land, even though it has been damaged, that is impossible in the industrial world. So let me ask you this.
Let me just add one more thing too.
Sure.
Small scale mining is the largest contributor of global mercury after coal-fired plants. So
if we could change that,
we can change that. We can reduce global mercury significantly by supporting ethical small-scale mining and fair trade gold.
And so the other question is something that you and I were talking about before, is there enough gold in the world that we don't need industrial mining anymore?
Look, there's so much gold sitting in safes that we really do not need large-scale industrial mining at all, in my view. But for small-scale miners, it isn't the politics of greed, it's the politics of bread. Mm-hmm. And that's the critical difference. That's why small-scale mining and supporting like fair trade gold and other initiatives that actually have best practices out of these small-scale mines is so important. Because if we're merely buying recycled gold, that doesn't really change anything. That's actually dirty gold rebranded as recycled gold. Whereas if we are supporting these small-scale miners who are doing things responsibly, then we are reducing and eliminating mercury contamination. We're redistributing and developing local economic economy in these small producer communities that really need support. We're allowing people to live dignified lives. And most importantly, we are merging the sourcing of jewelry with the symbolism of jewelry. That's what fair trade gold does. So that's something you're wearing a diamond or something that actually is a blood diamond. It's almost a perfect metaphor for our time, how this kind of weird, twisted thing has happened. But with fair trade, you actually know the source of your gold. You can go and see exactly where it's from, and you can know that you're doing really something radically powerful for people.
And changing somebody's life.
Absolutely. There's no question about it.
So you're talking about a form of transparency in the jewelry industry that we're starting to see in some other industries. It's funny, the first industry to do this end-to-end is the cannabis industry in many states, because they have to track at a DNA level product from seed to shelf. Right. And they're only beginning to think about things like sustainability after having done all that work. I've asked. Now, where's the gold and diamond industry in terms of providing that transparency? Is a fair trade jeweler the only place that you can get that information today?
Here's one of the greatest deceptions that I point out in my book. The mainstream is all about traceability and transparency, but if you have a large mine, mm-hmm. you already know exactly where that product is coming from. You see, this whole thing about blockchain around diamonds, mm-hmm. it's really, they say, it's to eliminate conflict-free diamonds. But if you have a big diamond mine, you already have control of your chain of custody. So it's not such a big deal to say, I've got it. Yeah. You see, because they do this as a way of deflecting from the major issue, which is, first of all, their atrocities of the past, which they have created a grandfather clause to say all is forgiven in 2012. That's the responsibility.
Well, tell us about that. That's really important.
Let me just finish this one thing about the chain of custody. This is a really critical point, because traceability and transparency in itself is a basis for ethical jewelry, but it is not ethical jewelry. It's right. What ethical jewelry is jewelry that gives basic dignity and economy and supports producer communities. Mm-hmm. You see, okay. So now what was the other question you're saying? Tell us about.
But talk about the grandfather clause, because it's a really. And a moment ago you talked about if you recycle dirty gold, it still's dirty. It still carries the atrocity.
Dirty gold is dirty gold. You need gold that comes from a community that rebuilds a regenerative-based economy. Now let me just tell you about that grandfather clause, because when I came across it, let's do it by analogy. Let's suppose that in 2012. The Pope of the Catholic Church says, everything we've done up to 2012 is all forgiven and responsible. We don't have to have any accountability for that. Mm-hmm. And everything forward now is part of a responsible standard for priests. Mm-hmm. I mean, if someone said that, if the Pope said that, it would be moral outrage. So why is it and this is a question even for ethical jewelers who work with the Responsible Jewelry Council and accept them as some kind of umbrella. Why is it that these companies can issue in 2012 and say everything that happened in the past, all our supplies, all our minerals, all our gold is now incorporated as part of our responsible certification system. It's all forgiven. This kind of atrocity could never happen in human interactions. Why is it allowable in corporate practice? And that's exactly what happened. And that's why I say that their so-called responsible narratives just cannot exist unless you believe that you can just absolve yourself from without even dealing with what happened to you in the past or the actions of your company in the past. So these actions are widely documented by third-party journalists.
And let's be real clear about this. We're talking about material, whether it's diamonds or gold or silver or other, that were mined under inhumane circumstances and that were blessed or given a pass by the industry, who then said, now we're clean.
Yeah, I mean, look, we don't know where these diamonds coming from, how long they've been sitting in vaults, wherever they sit, where the gold's coming from, whatever. It doesn't matter. If a company has done these atrocities, if you shoot your neighbor 10 years later, you're still responsible for shooting your neighbor. You're still a criminal. But with businesses, they can somehow do this because they're multinational and because they've created these fake forward-facing narratives that basically make you think that you're doing something good when you in fact are supporting the same thing that they've been doing for years. That's exactly more or less what's happening.
So if somebody were to come to you to buy jewelry and they wanted to buy fair trade, what would you tell them about the gold that you were selling them?
I would tell them the gold that I'm selling to them comes from a specific mine in Peru called Mictesa. And I could tell them the history and story of that mine and how they started as a small group of miners that were actually having to carry their supplies up and how they were working up 4 hours to the mine and how they were using mercury and then how they got support and now how they built a really good community and how their mining is completely monitored by fair trade and the kinds of improvements it's done for their families. And I could show you pictures of that and I could say this is the best possible, the most precious gold in the world are from mines like this and other mines that are opening up too in Africa and around the world. There are others as well besides this one, but mainly this is one of the main ones. So I could actually tell you this is a fair trade certified gold mine, which is really amazing.
Hey, lean into the microphone just a little bit more, okay?
How's this?
It's better. I'll cut this part out. So you're telling people the story of the gold they're holding in their hands that they're going to put on their body and carry around. And that story is a story of people being lifted up, not only out of poverty, but out of situations where they're bathed in chemicals like mercury that has terrible mental consequences. How do you communicate to somebody who is, at a point in their life where, they're in love, they want to buy an engagement ring or otherwise, and they want it to mean everything in the world? How do you help them ask the questions at another jeweler, and not a fair trade jeweler, to understand what materials they're actually dealing with? How do they see through to their story?
It's very, very simple. And that is, you want to be able to trace whatever you're buying to source. Now, recycled gold doesn't trace it to source, it just traces it back to the refinery. So with metal products, it's very difficult to trace the source, except through fair trade. It's one of the systems that actually allows you to do that. Now, with gems, there are, again, you can ask, where does this come from? What is the source? And there are specific gem suppliers that can actually tell you back to where it's mined, what actually happened at the mine, what they're doing. So, and then with diamonds, I think that there's a couple options. A lot of people are going toward manufactured diamonds or synthetic diamonds. They're not synthetic; they're real diamonds, and that actually has some merit. But the problem with those diamonds is that we want a diamond that actually would benefit small-scale producer communities and I go into one of the chapters in my book about specifically what's going on with that, and I call it the death of the fair trade diamond.
Yeah.
Because that's exactly what they're doing right now is killing the fair trade diamond possibility because they don't want that out in the narrative because it's too much of a market disruptor for all the millennials who are looking for ethical diamonds. So the main thing is try to find out where things are at. If you can find out where things come back from at the source, and then what's going on at the source of that mine. And to be honest, a lot of materials coming to jewelry, you can't supply that. I even sell things myself that I cannot answer that question because I sell garnets and other things where there is no traceability. But at the level, or transparency back to mine, but the level of like sapphires or rubies, there is that possibility. And diamonds, you can always go at least get a Canadian diamond, which there is pretty good standards, and I go into it again in my expose details about that, but it's an adequate choice. There's no perfect choice right now with diamonds, but there are some adequate choices.
Well, it's interesting looking at some of the stories that you included in the expose. There's a reason that the Canadian system is better, and it's because it's not treated in a racist way.
Yeah.
What was clear reading about some of the executives that you had contact with during your career in the industry was that they really had no regard for the people who did the work for them. And I've said that twice already, but it was really shocking. And some of the language they used was just disgusting.
Well,
but you're talking about really the great thing here is the idea of connecting to the individuals who are making a difference in their life at the other end of the supply chain.
Right. It's just like buying producer food. I mean, going on to the farmer's market, which I do whenever I'm in Santa Fe. I know the farmer, I know what they're doing. In the same way, we want to have that kind of relationship that bridges, and we have a connection to these small communities around the world, so they can have local economy, and the people of the land benefit from the resources of the land and prosper from the resources of the land and use the resources of the land in a way that's supported through certification systems that they can do it responsibly and send their kids to school and live dignified lives. All we want is the producers to live dignified lives, and we can do it if we have direct relationships with them through using our own economic choices to create a more beautiful world. Some of you guys will recognize that.
Yeah. And conscious purchasing is how we're going to communicate and vote with our money for a better world. So let's also talk about the fair trade program in the U.S. and the U.K. because obviously, since you're the only fair trade in the U.S., what's the difference between the way that they do fair trade gold in the U.K. and here? Why hasn't it picked up here?
Because in the U.K., fair trade had really fertile ground. And what happened was there's actually an alternative system called Fair Mind. And in the UK, which actually fair trade and fair mind gold were once one standard and then they broke apart. And in the UK, the market was driven by jewelers who were really committed to fair trade, and also the idea of having a certification system that's completely separate and outside and independent of the mainstream jewelry world. Now in the US, and this was driven in the UK by very strong progressive jewelers. In the US, all the strong and progressive jewelers which were members of a coalition called Ethical Metalsmiths, went to this program called Fair Mind. And Fair Mind, for reasons I go into in my expose, has not landed in the US. And as a result, we don't have a viable small-scale mining much of a small-scale mining movement, because Fair Mind actually is very, very tight with those Responsible Jewelry Council people. And in my view, the Responsible Jewelry Council and those do not want a counter-narrative to their recycled gold narrative, which is namely adopted by huge suppliers in the U.S. So basically, the large-scale, the Fair Mind program supports and is in alignment with the Responsible Jewelry Council. I did not want to work with that Responsible Jewelry Council because of the issues I've raised earlier in this podcast. Therefore, I broke from Ethical Metalsmiths and would not support the Fair Mind initiative as an initiative in this country, because I knew the fair trade with its independence is really the best way to go. Now, at the same time, I don't necessarily want to disparage the efforts of all those people in the metalsmiths and what they've done. They just made a tactical choice, which in my view is not really the right tactical choice. What we need to do right now is there is a supply chain in the U.S. Finally, I have had to deal with this initiative as a pioneer without a U.S. supply chain, which has been really brutal. But there is a supply chain in the U.S. that actually can support a real fair trade a gold movement here, and that's what I present many arguments, particularly in my manifesto, part of my expose about why it should be fair trade and why the pioneer ethical jewelers should move to fair trade, but I also want to say one thing just for clarity, that from the miner's perspective, both fair trade and fair mind are very, very good initiatives, what they do on the ground. But the real issue to me is what is going to create a consumer-facing narrative that is going to change a jewelry story in this country. And that clearly is going to be fair trade gold, because it is a global brand that has wide international credibility.
And companies like Starbucks, for instance, have made it a common household term too.
That's right. So it's got to be fair trade. Even though Fairmind is doing good work on the ground, it has not been ineffective.
So the jewelers and metalsmiths and folks out there who are listening to you talk to me, should they be calling you? How do they organize to make fair trade happen?
They can call me, or they can talk to Fair Trade America themselves, or any of the above. Great.
Now, your book is at reflectivejewelry.com, and it's easily readable. It's broken down, like you say, a Russian nesting doll. You can dig in, you find things, you go further in, you back up and start the story again. It was a fascinating read. And like I said, the stories are very surprising. So people can get that online. What's the next thing you'd like them to do after they've read that book?
Well, what I really want to do is build a coalition of working with environmental groups and social justice groups, because I really think that to support fair trade gold, a real fair trade gold movement, and I'm going to work a program where I'm going to give a very healthy percentage back to these groups. I also want to support this movement for. I'd like to see 3% of the U.S. gold market go to fair trade gold, and that would create a major anchor for the.
Okay, so what's our date as a year that we want to get to 3%?
Well, I don't know yet, because these are just early thoughts of how I want to push a story out that I'm going to be working with building next year. But I mean, for example, Catholic Relief Services, we're the only jeweler in the country that they vetted and that we'll work with because of Catholic Relief Services commitment to fair trade. And there are other local organizations with me in Santa Fe that work with me as well. But what I want to do is build a social justice movement. We talk about I was just seeing Dr. Reverend William Barber. I saw him recently, and he was talking about 42% of the people in this country are being poor. And what we want to do is what the policies that create the poverty in this country are also creating the poverty in the producer communities. And so how can I work with these people who are trying to create social justice in this country? How can we work together to create social justice and relieve poverty globally too? And I think that fair trade gold is a really powerful way to do that. Is to somehow create a commercial model where we have a really strong movement in this country for fair trade gold that supports alleviation of poverty and also supports some social justice organizations. So if you're like a nonprofit and want to work as part of a coalition, that would be great, because I don't think pretty much all the jewelry magazines, except for one, I publish articles. Every other jeweler, they don't even respond to what I've written, or haven't responded to what I've written, because basically the issues that I'm raising, I can understand it. It creates a lot of cognitive dissonance. But the thing is, I'm on the outside right now, and from that position, what I really have dedicated my life to is trying to create really good change. And so I'm kind of fine, however it plays out, I'm just going to work the best I can to try to create some really good thing in the world that actually benefits these people on the ground who are suffering from the old policies that need to be changed and that people want to change. The millennials and the Zers and many people all the way up to the boomers. We all want to see this change that alleviates poverty, creates greater wealth, and more equitable income distribution instead of just working. And the mainstream jewelry trade magazines and everything, they're not going to really want to push this type of thing out because it's contrary to their.
Well, I think you're not alone. There are a lot of people who feel like they're out on the edge by themselves, working on a lot of different things. We talked to a number of them here.
Yeah.
Sometimes I feel like my own life is like that with regard to talking about sustainability. But keep at it, because this is important to drive the awareness of not just transparency's value, but its ability to mislead as well. And so we have to be smart about the data that we're getting. We have to find people we can trust and talk to, like you, when we're talking about gold, or if we're, and interestingly, I would really prefer to see us all move to synthetic diamonds. But you made a fascinating point earlier about the benefit that diamond mined out of the ground does create for a family in Tanzania, and so. It's short-sighted to think, well, don't use it at all, or go with completely synthetic. With so much gold in the world and with so many diamonds, and the fact we can make them now for industrial purposes, it's not necessary to do that unless you want to create a story. So maybe the story is metals and materials with stories are better than ones that are impersonal and may have caused harm that you cannot see.
I think so. I think what we really have to do here, and I think that many of your listeners will all kind of metaphorically trying to reweave a web of connections that create fair and equitable relationships between us, between what we use in the world to live in our daily lives, and to have relationships with the people who are actually producing these things that we need, so that we know that our efforts are going toward creating regenerative economic models that actually create the more beautiful world. We all know our hearts is
and a more prosperous world too.
A prosperous, yeah, and it's not that I'm like totally into the I'm not like a neoliberal, and I realize that pure economy might not be the answer to everything. So there are issues of cultural integrity that economy impacts a great deal, and there are issues of indigenousness and how indigenousness relates to economy, and so these are really complicated things. But I think generally we can agree that if we can find ways to strengthen culture, and to strengthen the environment, and to strengthen the relationships we have to economic models that actually have those.
Well, and recognize we're all in it together.
That's right. Greater cultural diversity and greater economic diversity, greater cultural diversity and greater ecological resilience. Mm-hmm. We need to build resilience in our ecology, and support economic models that do that, and support producer communities. And these are issues, like that go across the board, whether we're shopping at a farmer's market or hunting our own food, or like I have chickens in my yard and I grow my food all year round. I Santa Fe, all these things that we all can do our part to create something for our children and children's future. Like the 7 generations ahead. We really have to. We are at a turning point, and everything that we do has consequence for all these people who aren't yet here.
Yeah, there you go. Well, Marc Choyt, thank you for joining us on the show.
I really, really appreciate the opportunity to have a chance to express myself and about some of these issues and talk about my book. So thanks again, Mitch. It's been great. Well, keep us apprised of how it continues to develop. So that's Marc Choyt, who's the president of ReflectiveJewelry.com, and you can read his expose at ReflectiveJewelry.com. By the way, if you're searching for Marc on the internet, his last name is spelled Choyt. So the C is silent, and you are mistyping it if you begin his last name with an H. So thanks very much, folks. We'll be back with another innovator interview on sustainability in your ear soon. Thanks for listening today.